On April 28, 1945, in the small village of Giulino di Mezzegra, gunfire echoed through the still afternoon. Against a cold stone wall, two figures collapsed under the violent impact of bullets. Benito Mussolini, once the most powerful man in Italy, met his death beside a young woman who had chosen to share his fate. That woman was Clara Petacci, his mistress and companion in both luxury and ruin. Their deaths closed the story of Italian fascism with a brutal finality. But to understand how they ended here, one must return to the beginning. In 1922, Italy was a country broken by war, crippled by economic turmoil, and shaken by political unrest. Strikes and violent clashes filled the streets of Turin, Milan, and Naples, while the monarchy appeared unable to maintain control. Amid the chaos, radical movements vied for power, from revolutionary socialists to Benito Mussolini's fascist squads, the Black Shirts. In October of that year, Mussolini staged his bold march on Rome. Though more spectacle than military conquest, it was enough to sway King Victor Emmanuel III, who feared civil war and admired Mussolini's confidence. At just 39 years old, Mussolini became prime minister. Over the next few years, he dismantled Italy's fragile democracy piece by piece. Opposition newspapers were shut down, political parties banned, and dissent crushed through intimidation, imprisonment, and exile. By 1925, Mussolini no longer pretended to be a prime minister. He declared himself Il Duce, the supreme leader of a one-party state. From the balcony of the Palazzo Venezia, he delivered fiery speeches to crowds, presenting himself as the embodiment of Italian destiny. Posters, propaganda films, and staged photographs reinforced the myth. Mussolini alone could restore the grandeur of Rome. Behind this image lay a reality sustained by spies, police violence, and a culture of fear. Internationally, Mussolini's ambitions grew. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia with overwhelming force, defying the League of Nations and earning admiration from those who equated brutality with strength. The conquest bolstered his reputation and deepened his bond with Adolf Hitler. By 1939, the Pact of Steel bound Italy to Nazi Germany in both war and fate. At home, Mussolini's private life mirrored his hunger for control. Though married to Rachele Guidi, he entertained many affairs, yet one relationship stood apart from the rest. In 1932, he met 20-year-old Clara Petacci, who had idolized him since her teenage years. She filled her diaries with adoration, and her devotion proved irresistible to him. By 1937, she had become a constant presence in his life, speaking with him nightly and attending meetings in secret. Mussolini rewarded her family with posts and privileges, but what endured was their personal bond, blurring the line between love, obsession, and political dependence. When war broke out in 1939, Mussolini at first hesitated. Declaring Italy non-belligerent, he claimed to be waiting for the right moment. That moment seemed to arrive in June 1940, when Germany crushed France in weeks. Eager to claim a share of the spoils, Mussolini declared war on Britain and France on June 10th, to the cheers of crowds in Rome. Behind the spectacle, Italy's military was woefully unprepared, poorly supplied, ill-equipped, and lacking modern weapons. The gamble proved disastrous. The invasion of Greece in 1940 collapsed in humiliation, with Italian forces pushed back by determined Greek troops until German reinforcements arrived. In North Africa, Italian divisions were repeatedly defeated, forcing Hitler to send Rommel and the Afrika Korps to rescue them. On the Eastern Front, tens of thousands of Italian soldiers perished at Stalingrad during the winter of 1942-43. Meanwhile, Allied bombings devastated Italian cities, shortages crippled daily life, and faith in Mussolini evaporated. By July 1943, the situation was unsustainable. Allied troops landed in Sicily, and panic spread through the government. On July 25th, the Fascist Grand Council voted against Mussolini for the first time. King Victor Emmanuel III dismissed him and ordered his arrest as he left a meeting with the monarchy. After 21 years of dictatorial rule, he was suddenly a prisoner. Clara Petacci, too, was taken into custody, their affair now a matter of public scandal. Though she was released, the image of Mussolini as untouchable had been shattered. For a time, it seemed his story had ended. He was imprisoned in the remote mountain hotel of Gran Sasso, cut off from power and the world. But Adolf Hitler refused to abandon his ally. In September 1943, German commandos led by Otto Skorzeny carried out a daring glider raid, rescuing Mussolini and bringing him to safety. Days later, he appeared beside Hitler, a pale, trembling shadow of the man he once was. Hitler installed him as the head of a puppet regime, the Italian Social Republic, based at Salo on Lake Garda. Surrounded by German guards issuing decrees few obeyed, Mussolini lived out the role of a broken dictator in a crumbling land. Amid this fading existence, Clara Petacci rejoined him. Despite the risks, she chose to remain by his side. She lived with him at the Villa Feltrinelli, where Mussolini rarely left the grounds. She wrote him notes, encouraged him to believe in a return to greatness, and devoted herself to him completely. Their bond, once private, became more open in these final years, even as Italy descended into chaos. Civil war raged, villages were torn apart, and the Allies advanced steadily north. By 1945, Mussolini knew his end was near. He confessed to those around him that he was finished, weary, and broken. Clara, however, refused to leave. Her loyalty was both a comfort and a curse, tying her fate to his as the noose tightened around them. On April 25th, with Allied forces closing in and partisan fighters growing bolder, Mussolini attempted to flee toward Switzerland. Disguised in a German greatcoat and helmet, he joined a convoy of German soldiers and fascist officials winding north along Lake Como. Clara insisted on joining him, ignoring pleas from her family to stay behind. To her, Mussolini remained a figure of destiny. The journey was fraught with danger. Partisan checkpoints, destroyed bridges, and hostile villagers turned every mile into a threat. Witnesses recalled Mussolini sitting in silence, head bowed, trembling hands betraying his despair. Clara seemed more resolute, clutching his hand, urging him forward. But there was no safety ahead. On April 27th, near the village of Dongo, the convoy was halted by partisans. As the Germans negotiated their own passage north, the Italians were searched. Mussolini's crude disguise did not fool partisan scout Urbano Lazzaro, who recognized him immediately. He was pulled from the truck, offering no resistance, spiritually dead, as Lazzaro later recalled. Clara clung to him, begging the partisans not to harm him. Both were taken into custody and held under guard in nearby Mezzegra. That night, Mussolini barely spoke, slumped in silence. Clara begged to remain near him, refusing to abandon him even in captivity. Meanwhile, news of his capture spread quickly. In Milan, partisan uprisings seized control, and crowds demanded his execution. To the people, Mussolini was no longer a man, but a symbol of years of oppression, hunger, and war. A trial seemed impossible. Fear of German rescue attempts and the urgency of a collapsing front made delay dangerous. Orders were issued. Mussolini and Clara would be executed without trial. On April 28th, they were moved to Giulino di Mezzegra, a small village near Lake Como. At 4:10 in the afternoon, outside Via Belmonte, they were led to a stone wall along the road. Mussolini shuffled forward in silence, Clara clutching his arm. Witnesses recalled Mussolini as drained and pathetic, resigned to his fate. Accounts differ on his final words. Some claimed he whispered, "Shoot me in the heart," while others insisted he said nothing. Clara refused to step aside, clinging to him even as the order was given. Walter Odizio, the partisan commander known as Colonel Valerio, raised his French-made MAS-38 submachine gun. A burst of fire tore through Mussolini, dropping him instantly. Clara screamed, throwing herself toward him. Without hesitation, Audizio fired again, killing her beside the man she had chosen to follow into death. The execution was over in seconds. A silence heavier than the gunfire settled over the village. The dictator who had promised a new Roman Empire now lay dead beside his mistress on a provincial road. The story did not end there. On April 29th, partisan trucks carried the bodies of Mussolini, Clara, and other executed fascist officials to Milan. Their destination was Piazzale Loreto, a square stained with memory. Less than a year earlier, German Nazi forces had executed 15 partisans there, leaving their corpses displayed as a warning. Now, the square became the stage for vengeance. The bodies were dumped on the pavement, and crowds quickly gathered. Thousands surged forward, spitting, cursing, striking the corpses. Stones were hurled, children were lifted to kick, and women spat on Mussolini's lifeless face. Years of rage, grief, and humiliation erupted on the dictator's remains. To control the fury, the partisans hung the bodies by their heels from the girders of a petrol station. Mussolini, Clara, and others swung upside down, their faces swollen, their clothes torn. Photographs of the scene, the dictator humiliated in death, spread across the world. By afternoon, American troops arrived to disperse the mob. The bodies were taken down for autopsy, confirming Mussolini had been riddled with bullets, Clara struck in the chest. Mussolini's remains were buried in Milan, only to be stolen by fascist loyalists months later. After years of dispute, his body was returned to his widow in 1957 and interred in the family crypt at Predapio, where visitors still come, some in mourning, others in defiance. Clara was buried quietly by her family. News of Mussolini's death traveled swiftly across Europe. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler received the reports of his allies' execution and the public desecration of his corpse. The sight of Mussolini's body, spat upon and strung upside down, haunted him. 2 days later, on April 30th, Hitler and Eva Braun ended their lives in the Führer bunker, their bodies burned to prevent a similar fate. The parallel was stark. Mussolini's mistress had chosen to die with him. Hitler's companion became his wife in death. Both dictators' ends were shaped not only by defeat, but by the fear of humiliation. For Italians, Mussolini's execution closed the chapter of fascism with unforgettable brutality. For Europe, it was both justice and warning. No dictator, however powerful, could escape the reckoning of the people once his grip on power broke. From the roaring balconies of Rome to a stone wall in Mezzegra, Mussolini's career had been built on spectacle, and it ended as spectacle. Clara Petacci's devotion turned into tragedy, sealing her fate beside him. Gunfire ended Mussolini's life, but the image of his death defined his legacy. Piazzale Loreto froze him forever, not as a leader, but as a corpse hung for judgment. His story ended there. But for Hitler, watching from Berlin, it was a vision of the future, a warning that came true within days.